kitchen cooking pies with my baby, yeah.
Took me a long time, lots of trial and error, many failed attempts to perfect my pie crust. What I'm gonna share with you today is the recipe I've been using for the past like 6 or 7 years. All I did when I went vegan was substitute out the dairy butter, substitute in vegan butter. I use Earth Balance. The result is virtually the same. It's still buttery and flaky and amazing. What it really comes down to is the technique. This recipe makes 2 pie crusts and you'll need 3 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1 tablespoon of sugar, which is optional. And I like to use half a cup or 1 stick of vegan butter and half a cup of vegetable shortening. You can use Crisco shortening, but I like the Earth Balance because it's non-hydrogenated, so slightly better for you. Although, you know, pie crust is going to be unhealthy no matter how you spin it. So you're going to cut your fat into cubes and you're going to chill it in the freezer for at least 30 minutes. For pie crust, you want to keep your ingredients as cold as possible. It's very important to the final texture. You'll also want about half a cup of ice cold water. In a big bowl, combine your flour, salt, and sugar, and then add in your chilled fat, and you're going to use your handy-dandy pastry blender or the back of a fork or 2 knives to cut your butter into the flour into pea-sized pieces. Some will be smaller, some will be bigger. That's okay as long as the pieces are more or less uniform. Now you're going to drizzle in your ice water 1 or 2 tablespoons at a time. You're going to take a fork and gently toss the ingredients together. You don't want to stir it too vigorously because we want the little bits of butter to stay intact. That's what's going to create the flaky layers that you want. Depending on your specific ingredients and the humidity where you are, you may need a little more or less than half a cup of water, but you'll know that you've added enough when the dough starts to clump together, and when you squeeze it in your palm, it holds its shape, sort of like wet sand. At this point, you want to press the dough together into a big ball. We are not kneading the dough, we're just using very firm pressure to get it to stick. And if there are some areas that are still super dry and crumbly, you can add a tiny sprinkle of water, toss it with a fork until it starts to come together, and then press that into the rest of the ball of dough. Next, you want a clean surface. I love this silicone mat because it's easy to clean. It has measurements for later when you roll out your dough. You're going to dust it with a little bit of flour, dump out your dough ball. Now this is the point where you'll knead it just a little bit. So I like to press it flat, take the crumbly edges and fold them into the center, and then just repeat the same pressing motion as before to get everything to stick together. I only knead it once or twice. You want to handle the dough as little as possible just to get it to stick together, and if you knead it too much, you'll overdevelop the gluten and your finished crust will be tough. Now split your dough in 2 halves, press them into 2 nice round discs to make it easier to roll them out in circles later. Dust them with a little bit of flour and cover them in plastic wrap or Tupperware and chill them for at least 30 minutes. And at this point you can also freeze them to use at a later date. If you do that, just defrost them in the refrigerator the night before you do plan to use them. You'll want to roll out your chilled dough on a lightly floured surface, and as you can see here, I prefer to always roll from the center outwards rather than rolling back and forth across the entire pie crust, and this just helps it roll out nice and even in thickness and also keeps it nice and round for your pie pan. When it's the right size, I like to fold it in half twice and then place the point in the center of my pie pan and then unfold it so it's already centered. Press it into the pan and then use some scissors to trim it. You're going to leave about ½ inch of overhang, and by the way, you can save the scraps, bake them with a little bit of cinnamon sugar, and they're amazing. Just fold the overhang underneath and then you can crimp your edges using the back of a fork, or you can do a fluted edge, which is what I'm showing here. You're just going to press the edge between your 2 knuckles all the way around. Finally, take a fork, prick the crust all the way around. This is going to let the steam escape so there won't be any weird bubbles in the bottom or the sides of your crust, and it will cook evenly. I put my pie crust in the freezer while I'm preparing my filling. This gives it a chance to firm up, and now the cook time will vary depending on the recipe, but in general, for fruit pies, I recommend baking the pie at 425 degrees for the first 15 minutes, then lower the heat, bake it for the rest of the time, and starting it out at the higher temperature helps the bottom crust to get a nice crisp golden brown finish rather than coming out pale and soggy. We're vegans here, so we can't do that egg wash thing, but if you want your crust to have a nice glossy finish, you can brush it with a mixture of soy milk and maple syrup or some agave. I'm usually too lazy to do that. I think it turns out pretty either way. As you can see, the finished product looks super flaky, nice and golden, and the bottom crust comes up nice and clean from the pan, and it holds its shape pretty well. That's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe it inspires you to try to make your own homemade pie crust this holiday season. Please let me know if you do. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
And I get high with my baby. I just let the mala get fly with my baby, yeah. And I can ride with my baby. I be in the kitchen cooking pie.